He holds the distinction of having the longest flight to NIO this year. Let's hear it for Kevin L. Brown.
Morning. Let's give it up for the NextAfter team and the NIO Summit team and the stage crew. Thank you, thank you, thank you. In 2019, I spent a lot of time in African prisons. I was doing field study with a struggling nonprofit leader in Uganda. He experienced a series of fundraising failures and had just received a harsh, but true and perhaps funny, rejection from a major donor. So before I tell you what this high net worth said, a quick show of hands. How many of you have ever been rejected by a donor? Right, almost all of us have, right? So in the last couple of days here at the NIO Summit, a few of you shared with me your most memorable and perhaps funny donor rejection stories. So get this. Justin from the NextAfter team, he used to work in fundraising, and they used premium donor experiences like books. But he was once told, "I give you money to do your mission, not to send me crap." Yikes. Caitlin from Colorado. Caitlin, where you at? Woo! Caitlin reminds us about the power and the importance of donor messaging because a donor once told her, true story, "You're dehumanizing children by calling them kids. Kids are baby goats." Okay, true story, true story. And then finally, Andres from Peru, who works in solar energy, important stuff, had a donor tell him, "What you do is boring. I want to support something exciting, like giving a child a Christmas present." Ooh, talk about some tough love. So back to that nonprofit leader in Uganda and his tough love. After a fundraising pitch, this major donor flat out told him, "No, because your brand is shit." I think that's my rich guy impression. Sadly, this nonprofit was doing incredible legal work with people in some of the world's worst prisons. People who often had not been convicted of a crime, who often had no lawyer, and who often waited years in crowded prison cells without a trial. The same people who then learned how to defend themselves and others in court. I visited their work in 8 prisons, and I listened to people on death row, including women with their babies who were growing up behind bars. This charity was creating such an impact that even the prison guards started joining the program to legally represent those they guarded. Powerful, right? The reality was they couldn't bring in enough revenue to stay alive, much less grow. I don't know if that sounds familiar at all to anyone here. We have a lot of large nonprofits in the room, but for the small nonprofits, many of you might just feel stuck. So I want to illustrate how common it is for nonprofits to essentially just stall in their funding. If we were to pretend that everyone in this room equaled one nonprofit, we would have a sample size of about 1,000. And so the truth is that sorry, let me go back just a second. So let's illustrate how common it is for nonprofits to just get stuck. Brady from Charity Water is speaking this afternoon, and they are a fundraising inspiration for many, but they're also a rare exception at $100 million in annual income. Nonprofits like Salvation Army and United Way are even more rare at billions in annual income. And so let's keep this thought experiment much, much smaller, and I want you to guess. how many nonprofits in America will even reach $50 million in annual income? By the way, that's roughly still considered a small business. Now, let's do the experiment. If everyone in this room equaled one nonprofit, we would have a sample size of about 1,000. So would it be half the room that would equal and eventually reach 50 million in size? What do you think? Would it be one row of seats? All right, let's see. Right down here in front. Do you mind standing up for us, please? Round of applause. That's it. One in 1,000 nonprofits will grow beyond a small business. Thank you. You can have a seat. In fact, in the United States, 88% of nonprofits operate on less than $500,000 a year. Only 3% will ever surpass $5 million per year. It's painfully obvious too many nonprofits are too small. So, can we all agree that something about our fundraising system is not working? Nonprofit leaders like us and fundraisers and teams are burning out at record rates, trying to raise enough money to solve poverty and injustice. But by many measures, we're not making a dent in poverty and injustice. Why do I care? Well, I'm the proud father of 3 amazing daughters who were born into this poverty and injustice. But there is good news. There is a solution to this nonprofit starvation cycle. Our own nonprofit, Mighty Ally, was once stuck in the starvation cycle too. Then we made a discovery. We implemented this discovery with 230 clients in 50 countries. We grew like crazy. We attracted funders such as Cartier Philanthropy, and I was even invited to sit on the board of a couple of foundations. Here's what we figured out. To get funding, be fundable and findable. A nonprofit doesn't maximize its fundraising by just hiring more development staff, filling out more grant applications, seeking more awards, and creating more donor prospect lists. No, fundraising alone can't fix your fundraising. You must build your brand first, worry about funding second. To be clear, this is not a competition between brand and fundraising. Both are critical and inextricably linked. I believe there's a talk about this later. So it's not about the order of importance, it's about the order of operations. So if your funding has stalled, if you're stuck at a few $100,000 per year in size, or even millions per year in size, if you're stuck, if you're not growing, stop what you're doing, stop the old school fundraising rat race, gather your leadership team, and don't leave the room until you're fundable and findable before anything else. In this talk, I'm going to teach you how to be fundable and how to be findable with 3 laws each. And I'll even give you 2 exercises to start working on your brand. And what about that nonprofit leader in Uganda? How did they go from the brink of insolvency to raising millions of dollars in a matter of months, including a feature on America's #1 news program? I'll tell you at the end. Let's dig in. Be fundable. Being fundable means to show donors why you exist, what you do, where you're going, who will do it, how to get there, and when it will be done. That's your brand, and that can fix your fundraising. There are 3 main laws of being fundable. The first law of being fundable is that a pitch without a problem is a problem. The next time a donor asks what you do, don't actually start with what you do, because a problem statement from your theory of change is the initial, most powerful step in fundraising communications. Brian Miller talked about this a little bit yesterday. Donors must understand the issue before they can care about your solution. They need to lean in, be invested. This psychology dates back 200,000 years to cave people. Think about every book you've ever read or movie you've watched. There's always tension or drama. So the trick is never open with we language. Never when you're speaking or writing, always lead with the problem you're solving. Trust me, I get it. It's hard to break our habit of talking about our own work. When we do this lesson in our training courses, we will ask nonprofit leaders, tell us about the social problem you're addressing. And they will answer like this, well, we do this and that. And we say, but what's the social challenge you're addressing? And they say, our work focuses on, but you've already lost the donor. The right way to do it, for example, if a donor says, tell me about Mighty Ally, I would answer like this. You know how too many nonprofits are too small and most struggle with their fundraising? Well, only 1 in 1,000 will grow beyond a small business. That's why we. Did you notice the small nuance but big difference? So lead with a problem every time in your communications, because the first law of being fundable is that a pitch without a problem is a problem. The second law of being fundable is that complicated missions complicate fundraising. So a little reality check, folks. The number one, the biggest complaint we hear from donors is that they just can't understand what you do. I once sat across the lunchroom table at a funder's annual conference and witnessed a brutal conversation. A grant maker was giving 2 entrepreneurs the chance to pitch her, and they kept rambling on and on with incoherent buzzwords, empowerment and transformation and holistic and community and scalable and systems change. And she kept saying, but what do you do? And finally, she got fed up, ended up handing them her business card and said, why don't you check out our foundation's website, and if you think what you do matches with what we fund, you can get in touch. Ooh, yeah. Mission statements have been butchered, confused, filled with buzzwords, and forgotten that this important social sector tool has lost its way. Let me demonstrate. Probably wondering what this fish tank is. But imagine this fish tank full of water is your beautiful work. Your mission is clear. You're creating impact, and it's easy to see. But then we go and we mess it up. We start adding programs because we think that'll help us raise money. But donors are distracted. Then we start to talk about our mission, and like the 2 entrepreneurs at the lunch table, we ramble on and on. We use the buzzwords like Brian talked about. We use the jargon, and then donors are muddy about what you actually do. And then maybe making matters worse, we use different versions of our mission statement in different places. So our mission shows up one way on the website, and then maybe in the annual report, we go and we make it look a little bit different, and then the executive director gives a speech, and then it all sounds different. So these mixed messages make you look untrustworthy. Your first priority is to learn to clearly, concisely, and compellingly communicate what it is that you do. So this is pretty telling. This comes from Malago Foundation in California, and they are a funder who is obsessed with scale, obsessed with impact. Yet, they tell you your first priority is brand clarity. So, focus your mission and document it clearly, because the second law of being fundable is that complicated missions complicate fundraising. The third and final law of being fundable is you must sell donors on your vision, not just your cause. For people to follow you and for funders to fund, they have to understand where you're going, not just what you do. The power of vision has been proven in business literature. We've all probably read books like Built to Last, and the research found that organizations with a clear vision outperformed competitors by a factor of 12. A little bit more straight talk here, us included. A lot of our nonprofit vision statements are weak. It's the world where peace and rainbows and everyone reaches their full potential. And maybe worst of all is that many visions are mixed with missions. If you Google nonprofit mission statements, you'll get a bunch of vision statements. So here's a little visual to make sure that we get it straight. Your problem, which we talked about earlier, is why you're climbing the mountain in the first place. That's your reason for being, the base of the mountain. Your vision is the mountaintop. That's the change you wish to see in the world. Now, your mission is what you do to make it happen. That's how you're climbing the mountain. And you might start up one path and you hit some boulders and ice and you pick a different path. That's why it's okay for your mission to change every few years, right? None of us have figured out poverty and injustice, but your vision stays firm. Instead of the kind of typical nonprofit vision statement, we actually prefer the big, hairy, audacious goal. You've probably seen these BHAG statements. They excite supporters. They give you a starting point for shorter-term strategic planning. And a lot of nonprofits use these BHAG statements to raise a lot of money. You'll see on their website, by 2030, millions of this and that. These targets are plastered all over their communications, and funders love this type of audacious thinking. So make your vision tangible and powerful, because the third and final law of being fundable is that you must sell donors on your vision, not just your cause. In summary, to be fundable, remember these 3 laws. A pitch without a problem is a problem. Complicated missions complicate fundraising, and you must sell donors on your vision, not just your cause. Be clear, don't be muddy like this fishbowl. All right, how might we pull all 3 of these laws together? Obviously, a full theory of change and strategic plan is ideal, but in the meantime, let's use this simple tool. It's called the one-sentence theory of change. You can get a copy of it afterwards at the doors or take a picture, so no need to write it down, but I want you to be thinking about how would you fill out this formula. Because why? This is that problem statement. We work where? This is the geographic boundaries of your work. To help who? This is the people you serve or your community. What? This is the shortened version of your mission. How? This is your 1 to 3 programs or interventions in order to win. This is that BHAG we just discussed. So that's the formula, and here's a real-world example from that same nonprofit in Uganda. Because there can be no peace without justice and no justice without peace, we work in East Africa to help defenseless communities get a fair hearing in court through legal education, training, and practice in order to elevate 1 million people in conflict with the law in 10 years. It's a long, clunky sentence, of course, but it's not supposed to be public-facing messaging. It's supposed to drive internal clarity. So now that we know how to be fundable, let's move on to the second part of today's talk, be findable. Being findable means to occupy a distinct space in the minds of your ideal funders, plus routinely communicate your promises. That's also your brand, and that also can fix your fundraising. Like being fundable, there are 3 main laws of being findable. The first law of being findable is that difference equals donations. So emphasize it. I want you to picture a supermarket aisle full of green apples, thousands of them, just like the ones on stage. You got it in your head? Now, right in the middle of the supermarket aisle is a single red apple. Bless you. Which one gets your attention? Red apple, easy. Which one is the best quality? Debatable. That's why in fundraising, different beats better. Because being a unique brand is objective. It's hard to argue, but being a superior brand is subjective. It's in the eye of the beholder. You may be better, perhaps even the best, but it's not the same as different. So don't be the best, be the only. Why? Well, all humans, including donors, are wired for comparisons. This, especially in the social sector, where there's many nonprofits doing the exact same thing. These mental comparisons and this nonprofit overlap can lead to donor doubt. And so funders think, yet another health charity, yet another climate nonprofit, yet another education model. It's actually the second biggest complaint we hear from donors is they just can't understand how you're different from everyone else that they already fund. Check this out. I'm going to show you 3 American nonprofits working in the exact same space, but have positioned themselves very differently and very well. Susan G. Komen, feminine, active, positive, F cancer, young, angry, rebellious, American Cancer Society, academic, corporate, trusted, right? See the difference? Sorry, quick check of the notes. So here's a quick tool you can use to figure out your unique place in the world. If you can think of the overlap of 4 elements, you will find your ideal positioning. So first, it's what your community needs. This goes back to that problem statement. What you're good at, that's your mission. What funders will fund, these are the fundraising realities. Of course, you have to look at that. And then the 4th piece that's often missing from this equation is what others aren't doing. These are the gaps and the noise in the landscape. If you can nail the intersection of those 4 elements, you have found your ideal positioning. So figure out what makes you unique and then communicate it, because the first law of being findable is that difference equals donations. The second law of being findable is that diversified funding is a nonprofit nemesis. I know, gasp. Woo! This goes against everything we're taught in this social sector. We're all taught, diversify your funding, build that donor pyramid, take all different types, big and small. Well, it's time to bust that myth. I was talking to Brady at Charity Water about this last night, because diversified funding helps you survive early on, but it's not how you get big, just like Charity Water. So remember back to those 1 in 1,000 nonprofits that got to 50 million in size? Researchers from the Bridgespan Group studied these unicorns over a 40-year period to figure out how they got big. And they released a report called The Myth of Diversification, because the data shows that among these big nonprofits, 90% had a single dominant funding type, such as individuals, corporations, governments, or service fees or foundations, not various sources of funding. What's more is that this single dominant funding type accounted for 90% of their total funding. In other words, if you want to get big, and not all nonprofits need to or want to grow, but if you do, you have to eventually muster the courage to put all of your eggs in one basket. Again, not one single funder, that would be risky. We're talking about a single type or category of funder. Boards can pressure leaders to pursue diversification. I would ask boards to encourage the right kind of diversification. More funders in a primary source. This is Jane Liu, CEO of the fundraising firm Smarter Good. She had nothing to do with that study, but she echoes the same advice. In positioning strategy, this means you must pick your priority audiences. Nonprofits think you can target individual donors and high net worths and corporations and media and beneficiaries and industry, but it's just not possible. You must pick 3 audiences max. Sure, you can customize your messaging a bit depending on the medium, but at the end of the day, you have one brand. So narrow the targets for that brand, because the second law of being findable is that diversified funding is a nonprofit nemesis. The third and final law of being findable is that brands that chase all channels chase away funding. We hear it often, omnichannel marketing. People telling you all the marketing channels to reach donors, telling you the more communications channels, the better. And sure, this peso model is great. You've probably seen it, paid, earned, shared, and owned. It's great for big brands, big NGOs. Many of you in this room might use it, but for smaller nonprofits, most of this MarCom is noise. Here's the fix. No matter your size, you have to start with, at the least, a 10-slide pitch deck. Surprising how many organizations don't have that. 5-page website. It sounds small, but until you optimize those, the rest of the pages don't matter. 3-line elevator pitch. See if everyone in your organization could give the exact 3 lines, similar to what Brian talked about. And then a monthly email newsletter. No podcasts, no ads, no video, no speeches, no events, not until you do this basic stuff well. Because you can do all 4 of these for cheap or free and collectively raise millions in fundraising. My guess is for many of you in this room, your comms team is either non-existent, small, or stretched thin. And so until these 4 primary marketing assets are 100% optimized, ignore everything else. You are everywhere, but you don't have to be. Strategy is a decision to take a path to say no. Wise words from Christina at Brain Traffic. So optimize your website, 2 channels, because the third and final law of being findable is that brands that chase all channels chase away funding. In summary, to be findable, remember, difference equals donations, emphasize it. Diversified funding is a nonprofit nemesis, and brands that chase all channels chase away funding. How might we bring these 3 laws together? Again, a full positioning strategy and marketing communications mix is ideal, of course, But in the meantime, here's another one-sentence tool you can use. Again, you can get a copy at the door on the way out, take a picture, but just think about how would you figure out this formula? How would you fill this out? Unlike competitors. These are either the organizations you run up against or maybe the big one in your field. We are 3 uniques. These are those differentiators we just discussed. We reach main audience. Among those priority audiences, this is the main one, via 2 channels. This is that primary and secondary channel that you have to pick in order to one goal. We didn't discuss this specifically, but this is essentially what you're trying to accomplish in your marketing. So that's the formula. Here's the real-world example. Unlike free legal aid NGOs, we are comprised of defenseless communities. We provide legal education, we focus on criminal justice, and we reach high net worths through email public speaking in order to build a base of multi-year unrestricted funding. Again, like the one-sentence theory of change, it's long, it's not supposed to be public-facing, but it's honestly more of a marketing strategy than many of us have today. So, I've taught you how to be fundable and findable, but before we go, I promised to tell you how the story ended for that nonprofit in Uganda. After the high net worth told them that their brand was shit, well, the nonprofit leader pulled an epic power move, and he told the donor, "Why don't you put your money where your mouth is and pay for us to make the brand better?" Which the donor did. So we spent months helping our client, justice defenders, become fundable and findable. It started with a new theory of change, a new strategic plan, a new positioning strategy, new marketing communications mix. It included a new name, new visual identity, new website, and more. And then we helped justice defenders tell their story to millions of people around the world with Anderson Cooper on 60 Minutes. Every element of the brand worked in unison. Guess what happened? Fundraising flourished, maybe no surprise. We broke the annual online donation record by 2,100% in just 5 weeks. We recruited 166 new high net worths to join the monthly donor community. They received a $4 million unrestricted grant from Mackenzie Scott. And best of all, this same donor, our friend who started this whole story with his tough love, after seeing the new brand, he gave $1.5 million and became a long-term supporter. I see that right there. Yep. So there you have it. That's how to get funding. Now I have one call to action for you. If your funding has stalled, no matter your size, if you've stopped growing, stop what you're doing, stop the old school fundraising rat race, gather your leadership team, and don't leave the room until you're fundable and findable. Brand first, funding second. At least get started with those 2 exercises I gave you today. I promise it's not that complicated and you can do it. If you do it, if you turn these ideas into action in the short term, you'll feel aligned internally, operating with more clarity and confidence, which will lead to being amplified externally, using a louder, sharper voice, which will lead to, in the long run, maximized fundraising. Let's get more of you to 5 million, 15 million, even 50 million in size, because your financial resilience is the catalyst for a better world. Time is ticking. Our communities need more of us. So be fundable, be findable, be unstoppable. You've got this. Thank you.